Still, I'm an alcoholic. I thought the promises said fear of people will leave us, but that's not been my experience this morning. But by the grace of God, a God that I was afraid to believe in, by the way, I haven't had any mind or mood altering substance since November 16th, 2015. I actually went into rehab at that time on November 3, but it took me a while to detox from legal prescription drugs, which I honestly, even at that point, had no idea were also bad for me, because I have a disease in which there's a physical allergy, which once I set off that physical allergy, I can't stop drinking, and I can't stop using. And that was my experience. I like what the reading says. The only way that I've managed to sit before you today is through, having a sponsor that I have a good relationship with. He probably knows me better he definitely knows me better than my own mother knows me. And through you guys, the reading talks about the fellowship and the place in our fellowship and how valuable that is to someone's recovery. It's the only reason, that I can sit here before you. And to be honest, I always feel a bit uncomfortable, when people congratulate me for another year clean and sober, because really all I am is I'm an alcoholic who can't live life successfully because of my disease. I'm an alcoholic who can't even drink successfully because that's why I'm here. And I guess all that happened to me personally is that I got broken enough to let the light of this program in, and I'm going to do my best, to try and share with you today, kind of what happened. So I was born in Benoni, so I've got two problems, and all I can remember is fear from growing up. The earliest example would be when my parents dropped me off at school. I would cry. I believed my parents were never going to fetch me again, and I had no rhyme or reason to believe that because I came from a stable home, had everything I needed. My parents eventually got divorced, but they were certainly quite stable then. I had no reason to believe that would happen, but this was my first foray into this crushing fear that would become a factor through the rest of my life. By comparison, my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, would be dropped off at school and merrily go about her day without that problem. So already my reaction to fear was different. And I remember things like demerits, getting in trouble with a teacher, the first time I was rejected by a girl, getting bullied. I found all of those experiences were devastating, and some of those experiences I still held on to, sitting in rehab at the age of 32, still having to process resentments because I was bullied, like in primary school, which is not a normal way to kind of conduct one's life. I guess my experience of this disease is I had no idea what was wrong with me, absolutely no idea at all. One thing that did stand out for me was, I was raised in quite a God-fearing home, and we went to Sunday school, and my mom did her best to have us christened and show us what religion was all about and that type of thing. And it was around about the age of 14 where I had my first drink, and I've never forgotten that experience, because all those fears that I'd kind of gone through as a kid instantly disappeared. It was the most incredible sense of relief that I've ever experienced, was having that drink. I think it was peach schnapps. Some people may identify with that. That was popular at the time. I think I drank about a third of the bottle, and I was just gone in this peachy heaven, I guess. And my reaction to that particular substance was not okay, because in me that day a switch was flipped, which would stay flipped for another 19 years, in fact, before I started landing up in rehabs and getting into a big mess. I had that similar reaction with other drugs, because it didn't really stay there with alcohol. The first time I smoked weed, it was amazing. I just had to have more. Weed just made everything awesome. It made a glass of Coke awesome. It made TV awesome. It made hanging around with my friends awesome. Back in those days, we would all get our computers together in a garage and play LAN parties, Joel Quake and all these things, and we would smoke and just eat and laugh, and it all seemed very innocent at a time. That then progressed into stimulant drugs, which would be most of my experience. At least, leading towards my rock bottom, and this is where I really started to behave a little differently from my peers, because, I would take some of these substances, and in Benoni there's a bunny park, okay? I know it's random, there's a bunny park, okay? Anyway, so my dad found me walking around the bunny park at about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night. The first time I took this particular stimulant, because I was amazed by its effect. I was absolutely amazed. I thought this was the most incredible thing I've ever encountered. And back in those days, we didn't have, I'm giving away my age here, but I didn't have a cell phone. So he called the mate whose house I was at last, and they said, well, they saw him walking in this direction, and he started driving through the streets of Benoni, and he found me walking around the bunny park. The very next few days, he kind of took me to, to the first rehab I would ever walk into, but only to get a drug test. And I failed that drug test, and they kind of begged me to accept going into rehab at that point. I think I was about 16 years old, and I just bluntly, absolutely refused to go. And what followed after that was a litany of what's a parent to do? They took me to psychologists, and they took me to various kind of spiritual sessions, with I remember going to hypnosis. I remember going to the psychic woman. I guess at the root of it all, my entire life, I hadn't felt okay. I felt like I didn't belong. I never felt that way at school. Throughout school, high school, varsity, I always felt like I didn't belong. And substances and drinking for a brief period of time helped me fit in. That was my experience of that stuff, because whichever one I was using at the time, I found all of a sudden I could dance better, I could talk better, I could get along with people better. I found that I would wear masks around people depending on what walk of life I was in. I could act like a jock with the jock guys, and I could be the chess guy with the chess guys, and I could be the computer guy with the computer guys, and I would just change my behavior accordingly, because even back then I guess I found a certain sense of affirmation from feeling a part of something. The one thing that was a constant in my life, though, was alcohol and drugs. Ever since I'd had that first drink, I never veered away from that, and it kind of, I don't know if anyone identifies with, it kind of started off as a weekly thing, and then it became every third day. Then it was like that for a while. Then it was like every second day, and I guess probably in my 20s it had become kind of an everyday thing. I don't know how, but I managed to study a marketing degree. I passed that by the skin of my teeth. I did a copywriting degree, in the advertising industry. I remember justifying my drug use at that time. Being in kind of a creative field, I thought, well, drugs make you creative, right? So this is my go-to. So I must be that guy smoking weed in the parking lot every day. I must be the guy, doing lines on a Friday night, because that's what you do in the advertising industry. On top of that, something which I had a love for music at a young age. So initially I used to play guitar and all that stuff, and I loved that. But eventually I settled in the world of DJing, which also I used as a justification to behave and act out with various substances, because in the nightclub anything goes. So this is kind of how my addiction started to take root. And my alcoholism kind of, sorry, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. It's really the same thing, but it really got its hooks in me, I would say, kind of in my 20s. And another area where I also used to act out alcoholically was in relationships, because I was a guy who always had to be in a relationship. And I would only learn many years later that I was actually a slave to the affirmation that I would get out of those relationships. Just like that feeling I had when I had that first drink, it felt like for a brief period of time that every question I ever had been answered. And I used to feel the same way when I met someone new, and you go through that period of infatuation, and things were just wonderful, kind of for a period of time. But because of my behavior, because of my constantly hunting for periods of infatuation, I was very bad in relationships, and kind of, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I'd already manipulated two women to get an abortion, because I had impregnated them and refused to take responsibility, because this was another thing that I refused to do throughout my entire life, is take any kind of responsibility for anything. It was in my 20s that I started having a lot of car accidents. I had my first panic attack. Yeah, that was a day, that was, because I had it like while I was driving on the highway, and I don't know if anyone identifies with having panic attacks from a stimulant, but you literally think you're dying. It's like a giant is sitting on your chest or something. And I had this experience, while I was kind of driving. I have no idea how. I never had a car accident at the time, and later on in my 20s, how it all landed up was I would eventually start driving myself to hospital in that state. And the longer I got in my addiction, hospitals would actually admit me. And I'd have to, I can think of at least 3 hospital stays where I actually had to stay overnight because of the amount of substances I was using. They would take blood tests, and the doctor would come back to me and say, listen, there's certain enzymes in your blood which would indicate that your heart is undergoing a bit of strain here, so we need you to stay over so we can make sure you're all right. 3 times that happened in my life, I went straight after the hospital and I used within a couple of hours. So as soon as I was booked out of hospital, I would go to my dealer and I would pick up again and use again. I became kind of that guy. I became the guy eventually, that my parents warned me about. I had countless car accidents. It's like a running joke with my family. There's a certain panel beater in Benoni. Like if I walk in there tomorrow, they'll be, hey, Stel, what's up? They know me like first name basis. I would go there every other week with bumps and scratches and my car, kind of all messed up. As I got further along in my addiction, my parents, I'll never forget the day my mom phoned me to say, my boy, I've come to terms with the fact that one of these days somebody's going to call me and tell me that you've died. And I was literally on my way to the dealer at that time, and I just kind of put the phone down on her because I was also that guy. And I don't know if anyone identifies with this. When your family's calling you all the time and it's annoying, so you ignore the calls or put your phone on flight mode for about 2-3 days at a time. Extended family like aunts, uncles, whatever, don't even bother phoning me. I'm never going to pick up the phone. Never. I was that guy. I'd rather be at home drinking, using, carrying on. I remember my dad phoning me sometime in my early 20s and begging, just saying, boy, please, we're all at the house, we're having a nice braai. Don't you just want to come around and spend some time with us? And I couldn't do it. Could not do it, didn't want to do it. Been using the night before, was too much effort. Because this is another thing I did was I moved out of home quite early. So at age of 21, I wanted to get away from kind of my primary family unit because being around them was too difficult. It was too difficult to use and do what I wanted to do around them. So very quickly you can see this disease that I never knew that I had put its hooks in me, and the physical allergy had me gone. And I spent my life finding ways and means to just use and drink. And as we know, that starts to come with a lot of consequences. And I guess the main consequences for me came in the form of a complete internal rock bottom. So how this took place for me, there were a few choice ones, that I can kind of think of. But I would say the most powerful one for me, and the one that always sticks out, when I think about my rock bottom, was I lived in this beautiful golf estate up there, in my hometown, and I was completely miserable. House wasn't big enough, girlfriend wasn't pretty enough, the TV wasn't big enough, the water pressure wasn't strong enough. You can just think of anything. My perception at the time was that life is shit, and I must do drugs in order and I must drink if I'm going to live in this world. And kind of where that perception and that way of thinking got me eventually was I would drink a lot, I would use copious amounts of stimulants, I would use a copious amount of sleeping tablets, and whenever the sleeping tablets were too powerful for these stimulants, I would just pass out wherever I was. And I reached a point where I had planned suicide. I planned to kill myself, and again, had no idea what I'd suffered from, even though I'd had many years of many experiences, people saying, you're probably an alcoholic, you probably need to go to rehab, you probably need to do something about this. I didn't want to listen. I did do rehab briefly in 2010, I actually owned a pub at the time, which was a fantastic job for an alcoholic. I picked up lots of women there. I earned a lot of cash money. I used to have drugs delivered there. It was, I'd be selling booze illegally out of it. So I met my rock bottom very quickly there, and I landed up in treatment for the first time. I wasn't really ready for what you guys had to offer me yet, though. Because I kind of walked in there extremely arrogant, shut off. I had experienced 12-step meetings for the first time in England about 3 years before. But really, the only reason I walked into these meetings was to get my family off my back, because they were breathing down my neck, saying, "What's wrong with you, my boy? How can we help you?" And I said, "No, listen, I'm going to look after myself. Don't worry. There's these 12-step meetings. I'm going to go attend some of those. And by the way, can you please send me some rent money? And then the next couple of days, I'll be phoning for some grocery money. And the next couple of days, I'll be phoning for some travel money, whatever. You know what I mean? And we all know kind of where that money went to. Anyway, I landed up in treatment for the first time. I wasn't ready for this. I kind of came out. There was a girl who phoned me throughout my rehab trip there. So I had a future hostage. And I planned that whole thing. I knew they kind of said to me at the rehab, "We're worried about you because you are planning to go work in a pub. You have somebody phoning you here, and we know you're going to probably not follow the suggestion to stay out of a relationship, and we're just not confident at all that you're going to do this. So why don't you stay a little bit longer?" They said. And I absolutely refused. I came out that treatment center, got into that relationship, went back to work at the pub. I drank within 60 days of coming out. That was probably the longest period of sobriety I ever had. And within a few weeks after that, I was back on medication. Because this is another thing where I've struggled. Because I had that feeling of not feeling okay for my whole life, I was always on some kind of medication, always on some kind of antidepressant. When I went to the psychiatrist for the first time and he said, "You got bipolar type 2 and you're depressed," and I was like, "Oh, ding, 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 here's my throw it out card." Okay, because anytime anybody confronts me about anything that I'm doing dodgy, I'm just going to let them know I'm not okay, and that's why I am the way that I am. So anyway, I get out of this rehab, I get into this relationship with this girl. The effect of that relationship on my life was so powerful that for about a year, I stayed away from my drug of choice. Okay, that's how long that infatuation period lasted in that relationship. I actually even managed to keep it together somewhat for a period of time because I had to show face. I was a known drug user around my hometown. Her parents knew that I was no good, and in order for me to facilitate our relationship, I had to behave myself a little bit. So I was actually drinking less. I wasn't smoking as much weed as I was. I wasn't doing any of my drug of choice, and I didn't do my drug of choice for an entire year. How's that? But as soon as I would drop her off at home, I would be using other substances. So at this time, this is where it really got nuts, is I was substituting all the time and using more of different substances to just change the way that I feel, but like not in her company type of thing. That rock bottom that I was describing just now, sorry, I've gone back a little bit because we're leading up to this point. This woman went away on a trip, and she went on a Kontiki tour to America, and I dropped off at the airport, and I planned a relapse already weeks in advance. And I went and I picked up and I went to a pub and I met the first woman that I could. And the first woman that I met moved into my house for about the 5 weeks that she was away. And it was during that time that I experienced this, several of these rock bottoms. Started to lose tons and tons of time. I spent so much time in blackouts. I had no idea, kind of what was going on. A year before that, my aunt also died. She got into a terrible car accident. She was in a coma, and she passed away. So a lot of my relapse was around that as well, because I don't cope with death very well, and I tend to make it all about me. And she passed away, and it was an awful experience. And I remember being very angry with God at that time. Now, I need to just put the disclaimer in that I wasn't a very godly person. I hated God. I didn't want anything to do with God. When people spoke about religion or religious concepts, I turned left. Didn't want anything to do with it. I'd had people busting my balls, for lack of a better word, my entire life about having to change my life. And often people would use spiritual terms and say, you need God, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And I hated God. I even hated God for taking away like my hair. You know what I'm saying? Because it like I was so self-obsessed my whole life, right? So not being the tallest guy, so that's why I became a DJ, because then you're instantly the tallest guy in the nightclub, can pick up whoever you want. Then I'm like, then when I noticed like my hair was getting thinner, I bought like, that's embarrassing, I bought a GHD, and I'm like crafting the little bit of hair that I got, just to make it look fuller, because I don't know, some hairdresser somewhere gave me that advice. This whole time I'm blaming God because I look in the mirror, I hate what I see. I've hated what I see for years now. And then I'm like, I discovered this pill, like there's some pill you can take that apparently makes your hair grow back. But then I'm reading through the indications, the little manual, and it says that if you use this tablet, it will affect your sexual function. So then I'm cursing God, because I'm like, God, so I can have hair or sex, but not both at the same time. Like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, what an unfair, horrible existence. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I had a big problem with the God concept. It's amazing, though, because come Monday morning, when I'm in deep shit, I'm on my knees, in the middle of those panic attacks at night. Please, God, please just get me through this. I swear I'll never use again. Please, I promise I'll never do it again. And then when I wake up and I'm okay, I'm like, okay, God, let's forget about that little prayer I had last night, and there I am, bang at it. I was so nuts in my active addiction, I thought that giving up cigarettes and running 5Ks on a treadmill every day and doing some gym would make me fitter so that I could use for longer. Okay, so I actually did that. Okay, so that's what I'm like, kind of, when I'm in my cups, and eventually I woke up. The girl was gone, couldn't afford to put petrol in my car. My parents were about to have me sectioned to a treatment center. I woke up one morning and I wanted to die. I woke up, I looked at a plate of drugs that was next to me, and I thought, if I die today using that or by hanging myself, whichever comes first. And I'd actually done the noose and everything. I tied it, I googled how to do it. I'd actually installed a roll bolt in the wall at my place. I knew exactly where it was going to happen from. And I was stuck in that kind of limbo where I was too cowardly to off myself and unable to stop using every single day. Horrible, horrible, loneliest place on earth. And my mom came to see me during that period of time and said, listen, you need to get into treatment while you have the dignity to do so. And I didn't know, but internally I'd taken my step one at some point there. And I said, yeah, because they'd been fighting me. I went to rehab first time in 2010. They'd been fighting me for months to try to get me into treatment in 2015. And eventually that day I said, cool, book the ticket. And I kind of moved down here to Scottsboro. As I know many people in the room will identify, I got picked up at the airport. Although I used to always think I was a bit of a rock star, that was the only time my name was on a board. Was at the airport when getting fresh for rehab. And they drove me up to this treatment center, and yeah, I was introduced to this program for the first time properly. I was introduced to the work. I'm so grateful for that step one moment, because I was never able to take any of the stuff I've been flitting about the room since 2007, and I couldn't get it, didn't want to get it, hadn't had enough pain, not sure what it was. But by the time I got here to Scottsboro, I was ready to take the program in, and yeah, what happened was, so far it's been an incredible journey. I mean, I'm at that stage of my recovery now where it's difficult to cover everything. It's difficult to cover everything, that's happened over the last 7 years. But I can tell you this, I worked through the steps to the best of my ability. It was the most honest I've ever been. When I sat down for a step 5 with my sponsor, it was a mind-blowing experience that I had a pink cloud, and granted, that's not everybody's experience, but my experience was I had a pink cloud. I identified with Bill W's eureka moment during his spiritual awakening or whatever, where I just felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. I knew exactly what my defects of character were. That was amazing for me. My anger, my resentment, my judgmental nature, my arrogance, my grandiosity, my entitlement, my expectations, my dishonesty, my manipulation. The list goes on. I was so excited to learn what those defects of character were, because by that time I was sick and tired of living life the way that I was living. I was sick and tired of the chaos. And the rehab experience came with its ups and downs, came with suggestions that I didn't like. It came with many tough moments where you people helped me realize what I couldn't see about myself. That for me is the real thing about this program. Is the people in this program helped me see what I cannot see, what I was unable to see over all those years. I found that answer here in this room, not in front of the psychiatrist, not in front of the psychologist, not in front of the most well-meaning priests people that I've seen over the years have never been able to tell me my reality, like my sponsor and the people in this fellowship. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. Through the amends steps, amends has been one of my favorite processes. I don't know anybody who rushes off happy to make amends. It's incredibly overwhelming. One of my amends was to stay away from all women, like relationship-wise, for a period of time. It was actually that suggestion, when I followed that my sister believed that I was in recovery. Because around about my 18th month mark, she phoned or a little bit earlier, maybe my 12-month mark, she phoned my mom and said, I know my brother's changed. My mom said, how do you know your brother's changed? She said, because I see he's not with some floozy who's 10 years younger than him and in some faulty relationship again, because that's been my experience of my brother over all these years. It was through following that suggestion that I met my wife, who's here sitting in this room today. Which has been incredible. If I never was able to make amends with my sister, one of the most standout moments for me was holding my nephew. So I don't have kids, right? I like to think that I'm going to have kids one day, but for now I've got nephews and I've got a little niece. And I'll never forget the day that I held my nephew. My sister trusted me with my nephew. We went, 2018 I think it was, so it was around about 2 years in recovery, maybe a little bit further along, and she gave me him to hold, and I looked at his little face, and I'm like, man, I love this. I love you. I don't care what you do in life. I will love you till the day you die. And I've never ever experienced that feeling before. Many of you know I'm into surfing and diving and all these cool things out here, right? So something I got into early recovery was shark diving. Okay, now it sounds pretty dangerous, right? The only thing more dangerous than that is telling my wife to pack the dishwasher differently. Okay? She need to throw that in there. But something I do for all my nephews, right, is when I'm out there diving, I look for shark teeth on the ocean floor, and they're all over the place. And I go and I pick up these shark teeth for these little kids, and I take them to my friend who's a jeweler in Durban. Incidentally, the same jeweler who designed the ring that's on my wife's finger, and he makes the shark teeth into a little jewel, so that I can send it to them. And my nephews now, okay, look, the one's very young. I've actually got a second one now, but the first nephew is he goes to his mom on a weekly basis, and he's like, Mom, please can I see the shark tooth that Uncle Stel got me? You know what I mean? And I don't know, that kind of stuff, to have little moments like that with another little life, to have an appreciation for that, to have a relationship with my sister today, to have a relationship with my dad, to have a relationship with my mom, to have a relationship with you people, to be able to foster a relationship with someone in recovery today, like my wife and me, that stuff is incredible. It's only because at some point I was willing to change. And I was never willing, I never would have been able to change were it not for the insight that I got into who I am and what makes me tick through this program. Through the experience of working through the steps, getting honest about my resentments, my dishonesties, my manipulations, my secrets, all the faulty behavior. It's an incredibly powerful tool, which has enabled me not only to live in recovery, but even when I'm not feeling okay, because there's been tons of times I haven't felt okay. My first few years in recovery were a pink cloud of note. I was surfing, diving, trail running, doing all this wonderful stuff for 3 years, no problems. 4 years, no problems. Okay, met someone lovely. We moved in together. Life was not without its challenges, but I was very, very, very happy. But I will be honest with you, from about year 4.5, whatever, the shine of everything seemed to be wearing off a little bit. And then the mad years hit, the dark years, the COVID years and the riots and, all that kind of stuff happened. And I remember, when all that stuff kicked off, this is when I was convinced of the power of this disease. was I was sitting 5 years in recovery, absolutely miserable, broken, depressed, anxious, going up to work, doing my best to give a big book session, telling people how to live their life, and sitting there thinking, but you're not doing that, Stel. You're not doing that right now. You know what I mean? There's things that you need to look at, and yeah, like I've come out of that now, the exact same way that I had to come out of it when I was in active addiction, which was relying on the fellowship, relying on my sponsor, getting honest about my situation. There was tons of stuff that was going on for me at the time. There were resentments I was clinging on to. There was things I didn't want to tell people. There was stuff that I had to discuss with my sponsor, which I was putting off. So I don't know if anyone identifies with that. You know, when you've got something going on and you're like, I really need to phone my sponsor, but he looks really busy today. I don't know. He's like, nah, I'll call next week. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally what I've learned today. That is my disease talking when I think like that. And I do stuff like that. I mean, even now, I'd like to sit here before you and say, listen, guys, 7 years in, you'll never feel nervous again. You'll never do anything nuts again. But it's not the truth. It's not the truth. Life has, for the most part, it's been an incredible, incredible journey. Don't get me wrong. But when I stop working my program, when I stop doing the things that I need to do, and I get wrapped up in self again, I find myself in trouble, and I find myself in a lot of pain, and I find myself justifying reasons why I don't need to tell someone. And that's been my experience. And thankfully, this program gives me a choice to pick up the phone and speak to someone. I've got brothers in this room, right? I've got brothers in this room who I've relied on. I've got a sponsor who I've relied on, who's managed to take me through the worst and through the best. A highlight of my year this year, because this has been a year of bucket list items for me, was I got married this year. Someone actually wanted to marry me. That guy who did all that stuff and was that way in relationships before, someone loves me enough to say yes when I got down on one knee. And I can't explain to you how, like, the nerves, the day when we went to go get engaged, I can't tell you the nerves that I felt, because I had to design, so I let her design her ring, so she knew it was coming, but I was going to plan the moment, right? So I flipped to arrogance straight away. So I'm like, we must get engaged in Stellenbosch because it's got my name in it. Okay? So then I'm sitting there thinking, listen, that's mad. But we were down in Cape Town at the time, and I eventually settled on the 12 Apostles Hotel, because there's that whole 12, I like something about that 12, don't know why. But anyway, 12 apostles, I got down on my knee. I'm sure she thought I was doing drugs again, because I went to the bathroom about 50 times before, I actually got down on one knee and did it. And what I was doing at the time, I was actually walking through the hotel to find the perfect spot and the perfect lighting, taking practice shots. And, she was asking, where are you going all the time? You know what I mean? And I was getting increasingly nervous. So, who knows what she was thinking. But yeah, we had that experience. It led up to a beautiful wedding, kind of this year. I had a sober bachelor's this year, which was absolutely crazy. Let me tell you something, because I must have had the most evil oaks on earth planning my bachelor's, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. This is something I never thought I'd be able to do in recovery. Have a bachelor's, have fun, be surrounded by people around me who are also sober, having fun. We had an incredible wedding this year where, all my family, it's amazing, because COVID kind of ended and it made it possible for all my family in the UK, my little nephews, everybody flew down here. My cousins who've moved over there flew down here. A lot of Jenna's family, all flew down here. And just for about 2 or 3 weeks of absolute beautiful madness, we were surrounded by friends, family, my family in recovery, my brothers in recovery, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, and it was just an incredible time, culminating in the incredible way that I felt when I saw my wife walk down the aisle. Because there's times in my life I didn't deserve that, and it was incredible. There was even rain forecast for the day, and it was sunshine. And I want to just bring up a moment, just take a moment to think about the alcoholics who are never going to experience that, because they're just not broken enough yet to let the light in. Because also, I've had all these bucket list moments, and I've had many incredible moments this year, but I've also had moments of incredible pain. And a lot of that has been around people who come to this fellowship and just can't seem to get it. And I'll dedicate the rest of my life to try helping people get this, because it really is an incredible design for living. And just a case in point, I've got to bring her up, is one of those girls who I was involved with. She passed away last year. She hung herself because of the power of this disease, because she just couldn't find a way out. And every year that I've been in recovery, you hear about people who haven't made it. That's kind of just been my experience. And I guess at the end of the day, I feel incredibly grateful that today I get to sit before you, and although I might be nuts at times, although I can be faulty at times, although I can be in a lot of pain at times, this program is always here to help me get back to life, because that's what this is about. This is about living. I have a living problem. That is my problem. It's not even about the alcohol and drugs. I can't live life successfully, and this is the only way that I've been able to do that. I'm just going to end it there. I'm incredibly grateful for you all. I'm incredibly grateful for the newcomer. If there's anyone out there who's dilly-dallying about working the steps or getting a sponsor, please just give yourself a chance, because this really works. Thanks for letting me share.